This is E&P Reports, a service of Editor and Publisher magazine. Since 1884, the authoritative voice of news publishing, and brought to you this week by Page Cooperative, the printing industry's largest printing cooperative. If your newspaper or printing company is looking to save money on newsprint, ink, printing plates, and more, contact Page Cooperative today. Learn more about Page Plus pricing at pagecooperative.com or contact directly CEO Gary Blakely at 800-468-9568. That's 800-468-9568, extension 196. Page Cooperative, the printing industry's largest printing cooperative. And howdy once again, Mike Blinder, publisher of E&P Magazine. And if you were to go to Google right now and type in Mr. Magazine, you're going to come to a website that says at the very top, if it's not ink on paper, it's not a magazine. And that will be the website of Dr. Samir Husni, quote, the country's leading magazine expert, according to Forbes magazine, the nation's leading authority on new magazines, according to Min Media Industry Newsletter, and a world-renowned expert on print journalism, according to CBS News. This gentleman has ink in his veins and has a very interesting outlook on the future of local journalism, and of course, a lifelong love of magazines. Dr. Husni is right now the founder and director of the Magazine Innovation Center at the University of Mississippi. He is also professor of Herdeman Lecture at the School of Journalism, and he is a world-renowned speaker and author who recently came out with a free 300-page book for the industry called Publishing During a Pandemic, where he interviewed hundreds of publishers to get their best ideas and thoughts on how to manage through these tumultuous times. This is a fascinating interview that a lot boils down to basics on how we can achieve success even during a world pandemic. I enjoyed this one-on-one, and I hope you do as well. So let's get started as E&P Reports talks with Dr. Samir Husni, Mr. Magazine. Well, I am honored today to have with us a gentleman that goes by the name of Mr. Magazine, which I think Dr. Husni, if I'm saying that correctly, is an understatement. You are quite a renowned, you're a professor, you have your PhD, you are teaching at the University of Mississippi Meek School of Journalism and New Media.
We no longer Meek School. I mean, this is a big other story. So we are now School of Journalism, and we dropped the Meek name.
We dropped the Meek.
Yeah.
So we're no longer Meek. We're just a school of bad boys.
Yeah. But we don't want to inherit the earth.
How long, though, have you gone by the nickname Mr. Magazine now?
I started. The name actually started from a student back in like 1987, in my second or third year of teaching. And for the life of him, that poor student could not pronounce my name, neither Samir nor Husni. So he was like in such a big shock, like, what would I call my professor? So he started calling me Mr. Magazine. And at the end of the semester, he gave me a little plaque that says Samir A. Husni, Mr. Magazine. And the New York Times did a profile on me back in 1989, and they sent a photographer who took a picture, and they had that Mr. Magazine on my desk. So everybody started calling me Mr. Magazine. And when the .com came into being, I bought the MrMagazine.com, and I figured, you know what, I better trademark it. So it's now actually a trademark that nobody else can call themselves Mr. Magazine but myself.
What is your pedigree, though, in the magazine world? I mean, why this focus on magazines, and how did this come about with all your background and all your and all the articles you've written and all that and more?
Well, it all started as a kid growing up in Tripoli, Lebanon. Back in 1963, I was like 10 years old, toward the end of the year, we start seeing ads on TV during the children's programming that there's a new magazine coming to Lebanon, coming to the newsstands. That, is it a train? Is it a plane? No, it's Superman. So two of my friends and I decided, like, when that magazine is going to be published, we need to buy it. We need to see this Superman thing. So I went to the grocery store the day it came out and crossed the street. The grocery store was facing our apartment in Tripoli. Bought the first issue of Superman. And as I was crossing the street back, something happened. I promise you, I don't know what happened. I mean, but all of a sudden I felt like that ink on paper was sort of like through osmosis or something going into my blood, that I fell in love with the art of storytelling. For the first time in my life, I'm reading a story at my own pace. I'm not waiting for my grandfather or my father to read me a story from the Bible, which was the only book we had at our house. And all of a sudden I said, this is what I want to do. And from that day, from that moment, I mean, everything I've done in school, in my Sunday school, in the youth group, in the Boy Scouts, was just creating magazines for that entity and having that sort of storytelling, the art of having a hero and a villain. I mean, it was like so captivating, yet my parents had other ideas. My parents want me to be a dentist. I mean, who, after all, wants to study journalism or go to a journalism school? So all my education in high school and in Lebanon, from 9th grade, you split the education between scientific education or literary education. So if you are going to go to dental school, I had to go to all the scientific. I had to take all the algebra, geometry courses, and if I wish I kept my notebooks from my geometry classes, where all these circles and triangles end up being nothing but magazine covers in my notes. I was an average student in high school because that was not my area of interest. And when I graduated from high school, the director of our youth group at the church in Tripoli came to me and said, Samir, I'm not asking you to disobey your parents, but I'm telling you, you'll be disobeying God if you don't follow your hobby and the gift that God gave you for journalism and magazines. That's all what you do. I mean, I've noticed you, everything you do is nothing but, I mean, this is your life. Go ask your parents. Don't disobey them, but just remember you'll be disobeying God and the gift he gave you about magazines. So I go to my parents and I said, like, Mom, Dad, I mean, I was like shivering. I was like so terrified that, I want to go to journalism school. And they said, okay. I said, like, this is it? Like, okay. After the torture of like those 3 years in high school, and said, that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. And, I moved to Beirut. I went to journalism school. I ended up being the top student in my class. The university stopped for 1 year during the Civil War in 1975, 76. We came back in 77. I was working in 2 magazines, a weekly, a monthly, and a daily newspaper.
This was in Lebanon?
This was in Lebanon.
Okay.
And in 1977, I graduated top of my class. I get married. And then I heard from the new dean of the School of Journalism that, this is the first time I hear somebody rejects the scholarship to go and work on a PhD. I said, what scholarship? The former dean decided that since I was working in 3 different jobs, making like 1,200 Lebanese pounds, which was like 4 times the scholarship amount, he just wrote on it, like, Samir is working in 3 jobs. He declined the scholarship without even asking me. And my wife said, like, let's take this opportunity. You will go to America. You'll get a PhD. Which war is going to last more than 5 years? We'll go back and the war would have settled and everything will be in good shape. And you'll work only like 1 or 2 hours a day, like the rest of the professors, rather than working like for 15, 16 hours a day. So we packed our bags. We told our parents we're going to America. Where? We don't know, because it was so late in the application process. We were told when we reached to Washington, D.C., somebody will meet us there and will tell us which university accepted me.
Wow.
And so we were like, just like carried our bags and came to America. University of North Texas now, used to be North Texas State University in Denton, accepted me to work on my master's. And my professor there, Dr. Reg Westmoreland, the first question he asked me is, what's your area of interest? And I said, magazines. I mean, that was on Friday. He said, okay, then go to the library, pick up this book, An Intimate History of Time Inc., which was 2 volumes. Read it, and we have class on Tuesday. You come present for the readings in journalism. So I go to the library. We had no apartment. We were staying in La Quinta Inn. We go to Kmart, buy a manual typewriter. I didn't even know how to type. And here I'm like reading word for word. I didn't learn the art of skimming. And the more I read that book, the more I fell in love. I said, if those 2 guys, Henry Luce and Britton Hayden, can start one of the largest news weeklies in the world at age 22, 23, 24, like, wow. I mean, look at the possibilities. And then I go to a newsstand to continue my hobby of collecting first editions like I did in Lebanon. And you talk about a kid in a candy store. I mean, I said, like, I thought we had a lot of magazines in Beirut, a lot of newspapers in Beirut. And then all of a sudden, like, wow. And so I continued my hobby. And now, in fact, I have a collection of maybe more than 35,000 first editions of magazines that I pay for storage I paid more than I paid for mortgage for my first house. And I want to create a museum. I mean, I want to take those magazines, donate them to someone who is willing to actually curate them and create a museum of pop culture, because it is one of the things that I've learned and I've studied is that there's no better reflector of our society than the magazines that come and go, because they keep on adapting to the trends, to the fads, to anything that takes place. Even if it happens on TV, you are going to find a magazine for it. Even if it happens on radio, you're going to find a magazine for it. And all of a sudden, I mean, you can trace the changing in our popular culture just based on what those magazines offer to you.
All right, so let me ask, I went to your website, Mr. Magazine, and right on the top it says, if it's not ink on paper, it's not a magazine. Over your left shoulder there, you have the word print. You are a believer in trees must be cut down, pulp must be manufactured, paper must have ink on it, and the magazine must be held in the physical hand, sir, to physically be a magazine. Is that correct?
Yes, indeed. And regardless of what others may say, if it's not ink on paper, it's not a magazine. I mean, how come we did not call television radio with pictures when television came into being? I mean, I know we live in a digital age. It's a great thing. I mean, but if you go back even to the ancient Greek history, where you had the philosophers talking about the permanency of things, unless you document it, unless you have it like in a file or in a document, it's not real. And you have another philosopher telling you that no one can cross the same river twice because the water keeps on changing. So, I mean, digital to me keeps on changing. Once you put something in print, that's it. You can just go the next day and say, oh, I did a typo here, let me change it. Or I've documented this and I froze this image, I froze this picture, because magazines are to me the first replica of human life. I mean, they are the first medium to combine pictures and words, which is the art of show and tell, which most of us humans thrive on that art of show and tell. Plus, once you have something in your hands, I mean, we were blessed by like 5 senses. I mean, and the sense of touch is unbelievable compared to any other sense that we have. And if you can, it's like I tell my students all the time, if you are happy with a virtual boyfriend or virtual girlfriend, be my guest. But until you try the real thing, it's completely different.
All right. I get that because, you know, a year ago, I took over E&P, and my background was totally advertising. I'd never published anything in my life. The joke around the big mega conference with all the big newspaper owners coming over and hugging me saying, welcome to the club. I kept saying, I found out paper is expensive. Postage is expensive. If I were to shut down the print issue of E&P tomorrow and just use a virtual, you know, e-reader, they're all out there right now. I would be making money. I haven't taken $1 out of this thing. I keep putting it back. But something inside of me says I must print. By the way, doctor, when we're post-COVID, I want you to come to Florida, because I have in a climate-controlled environment every issue of Editor and Publisher since 1884.
Wow.
It took 6 months to get them, but I have them. And every now and then when I feel like going back to, okay, I'm just going to shut this print thing down, I go there and I just leaf through some of the old ones and I bring them back to me. And I look at them and there is something final about that print publication. But many would argue with you now. You are in the industry. You know that Walter Hussman in Arkansas stops printing newspapers. He's doing it all virtual. I live in Tampa, Florida. The Poynter Institute that owns my newspaper publishes 2 days a week. You are a proponent for that. It's going to stay in our society. Those are your predictions.
Because our problem is not with ink on paper. Our problem is with the business model. We have created a welfare information society for almost 100 years, since the turn of the 20th century. When we discovered that I can find somebody to foot the bill, and foot the bill with big money, called advertisers, I start giving my information for free. I start selling my newspapers for 5 cents and 10 cents and my magazines for 10 cents because I wanted to be in the business of counting customers. I wanted to have as many customers as I can, even if I'm giving them the information for almost nothing, just to get the money from the advertisers and put the advertisers in touch with the customers. So exactly. I became more like the matchmaker. Rather than being in the business of selling content, I started being in the business of selling audiences. Now, with the advertising disappearing and the advertisers finding the same digital ways to connect with their customers directly, I mean, why would Ralph Lauren advertise in my magazine if he can send me an email with a link to a coupon directly? I mean, they know more about me than the magazine knows about me. So the business model, we have to take people off welfare information. We have to charge the fair price for the publication that we create. For the new, and that's why we are seeing this new business model. You see companies like Meredith or Hearst now publishing magazines with cover prices for one issue of like $12.99, $13.99, $14.99, where for that amount of money, you can get a whole year of magazines.
So you are a proponent of reader revenue, the new, where everybody's in the industry, we went the wrong way 20 years ago. We gave it away to garner the eyeballs we could rent. You are 1,000% on the, we should be charging for content, period.
I want to be in the business of customers who count. I want to be in the business for, I'd rather have 1,000 customers who are going to pay me $10 for my magazine than having 100,000 customers who will just pay me 50 cents for the magazine.
Where are you? I didn't have this on my list of questions. Where are you at with the social media giants of Google and Facebook, who are now trying to throw a few million here or there at the journalism industry, saying, we love you, but monetize our content today, where they take 70 cents of every dollar off the local advertising landscape? Where's your head at on that, doctor?
Well, I mean, think about it. Anything you don't own, you don't have control over. You can do whatever you can do with editor and publisher. It's yours, you own it, you control it. I mean, it's like the old saying, the freedom of the press in this country belongs to those who own the press. The freedom of digital belongs to those who own digital. So, I mean, think about it. If Facebook decide one day that you're out, what can you do? I mean, neither the First Amendment nor anything. See, that's what I keep telling publishers. I mean, publishers did the biggest mistake where they fell in love with this digital mistress who was like a seductive lady walking down the street. And all of a sudden, she's the new thing. And we stopped liking our old man print and said, oh, your legacy, you're old, and what happened? Now they are going back and saying, how can I use digital to enhance print? Or how can I tease people with the digital aspect? Because at the end of the day, if I don't have something in my hand, if I don't have a physical relationship, it's going to be virtual and it's going to disappear. Plus, another very important point, print comes to you and offers you surprises. When I get my issue of editor and publisher, I may know like what's the cover story is, but as I'm flipping the pages, all of a sudden it said like, wow, look, they started something new. Digital, you know ahead of time what you are looking for, and you go looking for it. So this.
Okay, that I get. What you're saying to me now is there's a difference between the passive and the active consumer of content. The active consumer is seeking something and finds it. The passive is the surprise. Back to the old newspaper, there's the sports section, and wow, they got my attention here. So you bring people into an environment and you get the passive versus. It's better to, all right, so that means the advertiser is an idiot not to be in print. Do you agree?
I agree 100%. And keep in mind, with print, we use those three things to create our most valuable player. We meet and exceed the needs and the wants of our reader. We validate the information for them, and we preview the near future. So this is what I consider is the MVP of reading. In digital, I mean, I can go now and to Google and say like, what's the cure for COVID? I will find probably 1 million. Your job as a journalist today is harder than ever before, because you have to be not only just the creator, you have to be now the curator, and you have to spend.
Say that again. You have to be the what?
The curator.
Oh, that.
You have to curate
right.
all that information and preview it to the reader, validate it to the reader, and meet their expectation. That's the only time they will pay for it. If they know that you're not only saving them time, you are also saving them energy, saving them money, and giving them something that's trustworthy. All right. That they can go after.
I know I'm supposed to ask you about your new study and your new paper, which I got to stay on this topic for you. So you are familiar now with the Local Journalism Sustainability Act, where a few of the owners in our industry, God love them, got together and said, wait a second, it's all about money. Let's give a tax credit to local journalists. In other words, if you hire someone to write local journalism, you get a tax credit. Let's give a tax credit to the subscriber to support reader revenue, and let's give a tax credit to the advertiser. What I'm having trouble getting my mind wrapped about is, what's local journalism? How do you define the journalist from the blogger? We don't have licenses in this country to be a journalist. Our founding fathers didn't want the government controlling the content. In other words, it's a free press. Define for me, sir, since I love where you're headed with this, what is journalism and what is local journalism?
Well, if everyone is a journalist, then no one is a journalist.
Okay.
What I keep on preaching, if from the President of the United States of America to my granddaughter, think that just because they put a 140 characters together, they became in the content providing business, then nobody is in the content providing business. That's why, to me, a journalist today must be way beyond content providing. A journalist today must be an experience maker. We must engage, we must create a relationship with our audiences. And when it comes to the local scene, you know, we had here in the Mississippi Delta a newspaper that has been published weekly for almost 100 years, published daily for almost 100 years. And then it was bought by a chain from Ohio. And then when COVID hit and the economy hit, they decided to close it. A friend of mine, the same week that paper closed, launched a weekly paper in March of 2020. I cannot reveal to you how much money he's making, but he's making good money, and the paper is surviving. And the paper was a welcomed addition to that community, because unless something major happens, nobody is going to be covering Cleveland, Mississippi. You don't know where your taxes are going. You don't know how the city council is doing, and you don't even know. And this is why, I mean, to me, community journalism is at its best when it's refrigerator journalism, because it also wants to see my grandson scoring a goal in soccer. And putting this picture in the paper, and I want to cut it and put it on my fridge. I mean, or Aunt Susie coming to like Sunday school and bringing her famous pecan pie. I mean, there is still room, but we have learned in our business. I mean, I have something I tell my students and my clients. I have a theory I call the theory of rejected simplicity. which to me is, we've reached a stage where if something is so simple, so common sense, we directly reject it. Oh, no, this is this. We have to go back to common sense. We have to go back to the simple things in life and give people a me time. Give people something when they look at this paper, when they look at this magazine, you say like, wow, there is something in it for me. Our biggest problem with newspapers was the fact that they stopped ignoring what was happening in their little community. When my little own paper here in town started carrying AP stories, I don't go to the local paper to see what's happening in Washington. I want to see what's happening here. And the saddest part of the whole thing is we've reached a stage where the word news and paper is an oxymoron. You can't have news on paper. You have to tell me what's in it for me. You have to go beyond just delivering the news. Give me the news on your digital website, but then tell me how is that going to impact me. I tell anybody who's willing to listen, your daily newspaper today must be a weekly on a daily basis. You have to start thinking and acting like a weekly, telling me more analysis, more information, more investigations than just telling me what happened yesterday. I mean, look when the Super Bowl takes place, what's the headline in the newspapers? Like Colts win or Patriots win or I mean, we knew that the minute it happened. What's in it for me? How can you preview the future? Which makes harder job for journalists because it's no longer just like,
well, see,
what happened yesterday.
What is wrong with that model? If I were to buy a newspaper today, I would be thinking more in terms of a weekly or monthly niche product as part of that brand. Okay, I'll use your term, magazine. I always use niche, which I don't want to, because you are Mr. Magazine. To me, that's niche. I mean, you're publishing a product that captures a specific demographic. And then you're making love to that demographic. You're giving them the content they crave, which is good for the advertiser. And if the content's good, they'll pay for it. So where you're going is a daily newspaper can put the headlines in an email, but then they should go in depth like the alternative weekly would do in the print product, make it more of an experience. This is what you're preaching now, correct? And then have a glossy monthly that comes out even more in depth.
I mean, this is the only way I can do something, keep something permanent, if it answers the simple question, what's in it for me? So rather than just sticking in print to the 5 W's and the H, I want to stick to the WIIIFM.
FM, the number one radio station in the world.
For me.
Yeah.
And that's the sad part. I mean, that's one reason I did my book, like publishing during the pandemic, because I also wanted to see people are bombarded with everything that's taking place. I mean, between the COVID, between the quarantine, all of a sudden, like I said, okay, so how is this industry functioning? And we as journalists, we've always functioned not from an office. We are always outside. We are always calling in. Even if you watch the old movies, we are always phoning in, or sending a telex about the information. So we are so used to working outside an office. I want to see how is the magazine, how are the magazines adapting to that? Not only in the United States, but also worldwide. So I reached to a lot of my friends and folks and said how are you doing? What are you doing? And the consensus was, in one day, we were able to go from a 100% in office to a 100% virtual.
Okay.
Now, that was great in the beginning. Now I'm hearing from some of the folks that they miss that interaction. They feel like the creativity is going down a little bit because there's no face-to-face interaction.
There's no discussion around the water cooler.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it. You called it Publishing During a Pandemic, the new book. You didn't call it magazine publishing during the pandemic. You called it publishing during the pandemic. So it's not just for magazine publishers, it's for any publisher to read these interviews with all the different people that you reached out to?
It is for everyone. And that's the main reason I put it on Issuu. That's the first book that I published digital first rather than print, because I wanted to have that global reach. That's why I put it on Issuu, and from the Magazine Innovation Center that I founded here at the University of Mississippi. I decided that I'm going to offer it for a free download just because there's so much wisdom, collective wisdom, from all these publishers, editors, CEOs, you name it, across the board, from a publisher of a small magazine, African-American magazine in Chicago, to the CEO, to the president of the largest magazine company in the world. It's all in it, and they are just telling us their experiences and why, more than ever before, it is so important today to learn how to cope to what's happening and to stay the trusted friend that people have trusted your brand throughout the time that your publication has been. Because as one editor told me, he said, Samir, people are bombarded with information about COVID. People are bombarded with bad news. My magazine never had any bad news whatsoever. If it's not positive, it's not in the magazine. You will never find a word about COVID in my magazine, because I want my readers, when they receive their magazine, that's the escape time, that's the me time, that's the time that I want to feel good about myself. I mean, and that's what we've seen it in a lot of magazines. I mean, other magazines, on the other hand, are pushing head on that, you know what, you trust us, we are going to tell you, we are going to have this combination of social responsibility together with the business model, and we are going to make it work.
All right, so it's a free book right now. I went to it and I started leafing through the 300 pages, and it is amazing. I haven't downloaded it yet because please forgive me, I was reading it virtually. I hope that doesn't upset you, but there it is. Okay, you have it in your hand right now.
I ordered one print copy.
That's the first print copy.
$70, but I wanted to have a print copy of the book.
And you had to use that overused image from Google Images of the actual virus that everybody, good for you. We all know it. It's Mr. COVID, but it's free. Anyone can have access to this. Give me the biggest takeaways. I mean, you've spoken to the littlest publisher to the biggest publisher. What if you met that human being that said, look, I only have five minutes right now, or 3 minutes, tell me what the biggest takeaway in your heart that you got out of this thing when you put it together?
That we have learned to humanize magazines, that when that trusted friend come knocking on your door and engaging you with a conversation, you can have one of three relationships with that person. You can have a one-night stand, you can have a love affair, or you can have a long-lasting marriage or relationship or partnership. And depending on the title of the magazine, depending on the nature of the magazine, some of them, like A Better Home and Gardens or like A Good Housekeeping, are long-lasting relationships. Some of them, if you are engaged and you get the Knot or you get the Bridal Guide magazine, I mean, it's a love affair that will last like 9 months, and then, you know, you get married and it's over. Or some of them is like a one-night stand, like, you know, when Michael Jackson died. I mean, we had more magazines about Michael Jackson, people who've never bought a magazine. People spend more than $55 million buying magazines dedicated to Michael Jackson. Those people may never buy another magazine, another celebrity dies all of a sudden. All my conversation with those editors showed me that there's still room for magazines that actually value that relationship and engagement with the audience. When I spoke with the publishers, they talked about the same thing, that the reason advertisers are sticking with us because we have that relationship. And that's why we want to continue that relationship, because we are much more than a matchmaker now. We are also a trusted vehicle of delivery in the midst of all the bombardment of information. I mean, we live in an age now. Can you imagine all the stoplights? All the stoplights around the country are nothing but green. I mean, what will happen on every intersection? This is how the media today is. I mean, print is the red light. It gives you time. I mean, that's what they tell me over and over, that this is the only me time. This is the only time you sit down and you engage in that conversation with your friend and learn something, laugh, cry, evoke some emotions. But at the end of the day, you feel good about yourself. You feel good about your society. You feel good about the role you are playing, the role you are doing. And that's one reason I've noticed. I mean, I started, like, you know, I continue buying the magazines, and I got one magazine called Love from the United Kingdom. And I read this article, the editorial by Ben Cobb, who's the co-editor of the magazine, in which he says, like, between COVID and between like being at home with no distraction, and we are like getting depressed, we needed some uplifting information. That's what we were thinking about, like creating this issue of love to be like an uplifting, and heck, the name of the magazine is Love, so let's spread some love. And then the killing of George Floyd took place in America. And all of a sudden, the whole world was focused on that almost 9-minute video. There was no distraction. There was the sorrow from COVID, and there's the pain of the killing of George Floyd. So all of a sudden, we discovered, and Ben Cobb was saying, like, we've been ignoring a big segment of the population for 400 years.
Wow.
And that's why directly I said, like, wow, there's an article here, there's some research. So I told my team here at the Magazine Innovation Center, let's start digging and find out, like, when were minorities, specifically blacks, on the cover of magazines.
Wow.
And we went, and the first black was on the cover of a mainstream magazine was back in 1930, which was Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia on the cover of Time magazine. Oh. And then we counted in the last 90 years, from 2020 to like 1930, maybe around 40 covers of African Americans, of blacks, on the covers of mainstream magazines in America.
Only 40.
Only 40. In the last 90 days, I have in my office 126 magazines with blacks on the cover. In 90 days, we have almost 4 times the number of blacks on the covers. All of a sudden, either magazines are celebrating blackness, or magazines are discovering their social responsibility, because, or they are just another business thing. This is the in thing now. Let me see. Because when you have magazines like for 3 issues in a row, like GQ, August, September, and October have a black person on the cover. When you have Vogue for 3 issues in a row, you start wondering, is this the new normal? Or we are captivating the moment and just trying to make as much money as possible? Because where do you draw the line between social responsibility and business?
Oh, that line's been blurred a long time, sir. But okay, so what I'm hearing between the lines,
that fictitious line about that myth we always had, is separation between church and state.
Yes,
that it really never existed. But the bigger the state, or the bigger the church, the harder was it to see that wall.
You could go back, and all journalism has been biased because it's created by a human being. You could take it back. The shot heard round the world, the Boston Massacre. I could go back in time and look, but that's the beauty of the industry, that it's a free press. And there can be opposing opinions, but let me see what I'm hearing here, if I may be so bold, from someone who really gets the industry, is you're proud deep in your soul that the book itself, publishing during a pandemic, is proving the theories you thought in the past that needed to be accelerated. In other words, the survival of print is the relationship circling back to good journalism. It's back to basics. Don't follow the money, follow the audience, follow the reader, and the money may come through reader
audience first was something that I preached when I created my very first newspaper as a child in high school, as a teenager, where I will go to my grandfather's house in the village, sit down, listen to all the radio news during the day, write them, design them, create my own newspaper, and at the end of the day, sit down and read my newspaper. Audience first is a concept I believed in so many times. I never believed in selling the audience. I believed in selling content. In fact, one of my books in 2003 was called Selling Content. And I compared our profession, that we are in the business of putting the ABCs together, adding some pictures, adding some illustrations. Or if you are in the digital side, adding some sound, adding some videos. Why on earth it is wrong for us to sell our content? Name any other manufacturer that creates something and don't sell it, whether it is cars or soda or beer, or why can't I sell that content, if really people value my content, if really people want to get into a relationship with me, why don't they pay for it? I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that rather than depending on somebody else. That's why I said we've created a welfare information society. And that's why I tell people, you want to survive in print? You better voice your opinion. You can just tell me this is what happened. Because original newspapers, like you said, they were never objective. I mean, they were partisan newspapers. I mean, look at the names. I mean, the Arizona Republic, the Natchez Democrat. I mean, they were all, when did that whole concept of objectivity took place? At the turn of the 20th century, when we started getting advertising to fund the bill. We did not want to offend any advertiser. We did not care about offending readers. We did not want to offend the advertisers. Because when we were offending the readers were the readers were buying your product because they were siding with it, they were agreeing with it. Same like what's happening today. I mean, it's the saddest situation I feel like we have in this country, where you feel the country is divided. I mean, I stopped watching TV. I mean, I used to be, the first thing in the morning, I turn on my television. Now I go for a walk. I have some turtles in my pond. I feed them. I enjoy nature. Stopped watching television. I mean, because you turn the channels and you think you are living in so many different countries based on what channel you turn on. That's why we need print to take all that stuff that's taking place, put it through a filter of trust, a filter of conversation, a filter through relationship. Because at the end of the day, and that's why I say, like, as long as we have human beings, we are going to have print. Why? Because there are three ships that cruise through all human beings: ownership, showmanship, and membership. We all love to own things. I mean, virtual ownership is nothing. I mean, from the minute we are born, I mean, we're born with our fist tight. We want to grab everything in this life. We want to collect. I mean, just look at your place, look at my place. I mean, how much stuff we have that we don't really need, but we have. We love to own things. And virtual ownership is nothing. Showmanship. I mean, we love to show off. I mean, if somebody today does not tell me, oh, I love your necktie. I mean, this is a very expensive necktie. I say, like, did I waste all that money and nobody notices this thing? Or if I'm reading War and Peace on the plane, I'm not going to read it on an iPad. I want people to see, look, this guy is an intellectual person. Look what is he reading. Or The Economist, or whatever. Showmanship is very, very important for us. And membership, that sense of community, that sense that I'm not alone. Like this friend I'm having the conversation with, there's another 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 people are having that conversation with. So I am part of this conversation. I am part of this community that we are all trusted. Like, you know, we are like a group of friends. We are discussing this thing. At the same time, everybody who is watching exactly, reading the exact same words, flipping the exact same pages, seeing the exact same ads. Because even in print, when somebody is sending me a message and an ad, that ad is related to the print. I'm not going to see an ad in Editor and Publisher for McDonald's, for example.
Exactly.
Yet, I mean, if I get a People magazine or something, I may see an ad for McDonald's. So that sense of relationship, even within the pages of the magazine, is also a sense of calming, a sense of giving me something like, wow, I'm not only getting the information, I'm not getting the education, I'm not getting the entertainment, I'm getting all of it in one package.
Right. So, okay, we got to start bringing this thing home, and we have to do another interview because there's so many things to unpack here. What I've heard now is Cleveland, Mississippi, lost a newspaper because of consolidation, where the hedge fund world or whatever decided we'll just strip the content, throw AP on the cover, and keep selling the newspaper as a distribution method for the advertiser rather than content for our readers. Your buddy came in and solved that news desert, if I can use that overused term, by, again, focusing back to local community and providing. So then you are a proponent of the fact that crisis accelerates change. That's what we're seeing now with COVID. You're seeing it with the book you wrote. People are moving quicker in a direction that you applaud. They're figuring it out. So now we're on the backside. COVID's over. We're 2 years ahead. Take out your prognostication crystal ball. I mean, and then tell me which stocks to buy when you're done, if you don't mind. No. All right. We're in the backside. I got a daughter who's 17 that likes to go to Barnes and Noble. I mean, she likes holding books, which I think is fascinating. And she doesn't watch TV, which is fascinating. I mean, you've got these news echo chambers that you just avoid now. The heck with CNN and Fox. I've had it. I won't even consume that content anymore because all they're doing is pleasing their advertiser base and just preaching to the choir over and over. What's on the backside of this? Is there a better world ahead of us, sir? Give us some comfort. I'm reading your magazine now.
Change is good. We have to believe that change is good. We have to believe that hope is like the sun. You know, we don't see it all the time, but we know it's there. As one famous Arab writer once said, he who knows the word hope does not know the word impossible. You know, I really truly believe in my heart of hearts that we are going to see the best of times ahead of us. Mainly for when I look at my grandkids, and I have 6 grandkids, when I look at the oldest one, he's 12. He loves his iPad. He loves playing all the games. He loves, yet he also loves reading books. I mean, when he was still in 2nd grade, he read all the Harry Potter books. He reads all his books, he and his brother, ink on paper books. And when I ask him the stupid question, like any old person will ask, said like, Jiddu, which is grandpa in Arabic, what do you like more, playing on your iPad or reading your books? And he looked at me and said like, why do I have to choose? Why do I have to choose? I mean, you talk wisdom from the mouths of babes. I mean, I said like, wow.
Okay.
It's all there for them. And as long as we know how to deliver each platform with the best relevant information in it, then we have no problem. Don't try to imitate digital. Don't give me sound bites in your print publication. Don't give me news in your print. You know, give every platform what it deserves and what its strengths. Stop and ask yourself, how can print today be that red light in a sea of green lights where nobody is stopping anywhere? How can you give me this me time, this moment for me, whether it is my newspaper? Everything is changing. I mean, when was the last time you sat down as a family and ate breakfast and picked up your paper from your driveway and sat down, you're reading the paper, mom is serving? Those days are gone. How can we adapt to the new days? How can we adapt without just like rushing and going with the flow? I mean, one of my books that I wrote was called Just Common Sense. And I wrote it after I came back from the Netherlands, after I gave a whole day of seminars to the largest magazine media company in the Netherlands. The CEO came to me and said, Professor, all what you told us was just common sense. And right. I looked at him and I said, and you had to pay me for it. If we have to pay for common sense, that's why I really preach that rejected simplicity theory. If it is simple, it does not mean it's not good. And there's nothing simpler than ink on paper. It was there from way back, and it's continued to be. That's why the new book I'm writing is called The Magazines and I. I bought every single magazine that was published in March 1953, the month I was born. And I'm writing a book about the status of magazines in March 1953, the year Mr. Magazine was born.
Wow.
And you can never have that same feeling digging into digital and Googling stuff like what was happening in 1953, as much as like looking at a magazine in your hand and seeing this ad for this new talking piece of furniture called television. I mean, it is just like, it's unbelievable. And that's why I say, as long as we have human beings, we are going to have print. So rest assured, hopefully next time we talk, editor and publisher will be published twice a month and people will be paying like $10 and $15 per issue, because they should not be able to get that information any other place. One of the editors of Cosmopolitan magazine in Spain that I consulted with have on her desk, Samir says, if you can find the answer on Google, it does not belong in the magazine.
Wow. All right. The book that you put out, which is free, and thank you for that, is Publishing During a Pandemic. Where can anyone find it right now? We'll have a link, obviously, on our page.
Yeah, they can go to issuu.com, ISSUU.com, and just search for publishing during a pandemic, and they can download it from there. And if they are like me, they can shed like $75 and order a print copy, because there are printers now who can actually print one copy at a time.
I know. I did my book that way as well. Talk to me about how someone can find more information about you. Just go to Mr. Magazine.
MrMagazine.com is my main website. MrMagazine.me is my blog, in which I interview a lot of the editors and publishers. Like the latest interview I have on the blog today is an interview with the editorial director of L'Officiel USA, which is the fashion magazine based in Paris and published all over. They just published their first global issue, and I interviewed him, and in which he talks about like, we want to concentrate on the things that unite us rather than the things that divide us, which is a great message in this day and age that I believe only magazines can deliver.
And they can find links to your books there as well, I assume.
They can find links to the books and
Mr. Magazine, I got to tell you, I have enjoyed this more than you know, and I'm honored that you get my magazine. Feel free to rip it to shreds. Give me good input. I like to say I know what I know and I know what I don't know. But I'm going to, with your kind permission, beg you for advice from time to time so we can make editor and publisher be something that I guess it can be in your Hall of Fame, if I may be so bold.
Well, I mean, it is needed. Nobody is offering genuine criticism, advice, help for an industry that is in trouble. All what you read about our industry, how bad it is, how bad things are. And I mean, one of my students' parent called me to ask me, it's like, I heard you told the students in your class that journalism is dead. Is there hope for journalism? I said, yes, sir. But since I'm a Presbyterian, I believe in life after death. There are going to be journalism, because journalism started dying when the first cable news network in 1980 came into being. When we took that news cycle from 22 minutes to 24 hours, we started filling things with, you name it, junk, opinions, information, flashing police lights, you name it. And then when the internet came, it added more nails to the coffin of journalism. And when social media came and everybody and their cousin thought that they are a journalist, that was the last nail in the coffin of journalism. But I believe we'll be back. True journalism will be back. Investigative journalism will be back. There's hope. There's always hope, as the sign in my office says.
I have loved every analogy you've shared with us in the last 46 minutes, especially that the digital revolution was the scantily clad prostitute coming down the street that pulled us away from our better angels. Boy, this has been great. Dr. Samir Husni, I said that correct.
Yep.
Mr. Magazine, we appreciate your time. Hopefully the hurricane didn't hit you too hard down there in Mississippi.
No, we just had one tree down in my yard, and yesterday I had to work for 5 hours just cutting the limbs because it was closing my driveway, so I had to. But I needed the exercise.
Always looking at a bright side. We will be checking in with you again, and thank you so much for your valuable time, Doctor.
You bet. Thanks.